These guys are like, let me disrupt an entire industry as a fun weekend project. We are back to catch you up on language industry news. Hi, Esther.
Hi, Florian.
It's been a full month since our last quote unquote news podcast, so there's a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, it's been mega busy, and obviously we had SlateCon London in the meantime.
We had SlaterCon London. You didn't have to travel far. I didn't have to travel too far either. Almost missed my flight going back because London Central, like I forgot how large, just how big London is. And I'm like, sure, it's 2 hours, the flight, Heathrow, and then like, oh my God, the entire city is just clogged up. And yeah, almost missed my flight, but made it back. This was a great conference. A lot of people, great mood. I think the hotel was fantastic, great speakers, panels. What was your impression?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, yeah, great audience as well. Just, really good conversations during the breaks and the networking. So yeah, I had a fantastic time. Really enjoyed many of the speakers. Some great content. Lots of AI, as you might expect, especially in the titles. But lots of super relevant content.
100%. Yeah, and I mean, all the subscribers can actually now watch all of the sessions on the video library. If you log in, if you're Pro or Enterprise subscribers, just log in and you can rewatch them. I think they should be uploaded or will be in the next few days. And we're going to replicate that in California, Menlo Park to be specific, on September 5th. Another SlaterCon planned. We're working on the agenda. It's going to be great. Really, it's going to be a fantastic conference. Also, really cool hotel. So I think we're open now for registration. So go get the ticket for SlaterCon Silicon Valley, September 5th. Now, there's only a couple of weeks left just to plug another conference. We have SlaterCon Remote, also a great program. Now it's final. So we're going to talk about the new ISO standard, the one, I think it's 5060 on human evaluation. Christopher Kurtz is going to talk about that. We're going to have a panel on language shops in the age of AI. LanguageWire CTO is going to talk about RAG in the language industry, a big topic. And then how to prepare for your first right to left project. That's a session with Cynthia Kanowitz, Senior Localization Project Manager at Bold, a company that specializes in online resumes and cover letters. And then we're going to talk about, with Phrase is going to talk about how GenAI can improve LQA. I spoke to Georg on the last podcast, or the one before last, about their challenge in automating LQA. So Phrase is going to talk about that. And then we have Intento and E2F back to talk about their State of MT report, huge report. Encourage you to download it. Freely available. I think they analyzed like 52 machine translation engines and LLMs. Really solid work there. So we asked him to come on at SlaterCon Remote and tell us more about it. And we're not done yet. We have a new pro guide, Language AI for consumers. Now, why would we publish a pro guide, Language AI for consumers? Because these consumer level AI applications are increasingly informing the B2B client expectations as well. So, if your friend is dubbing a short form video for TikTok and thinks it's a solved problem, then you, as the localization manager at big company XYZ, is going to come under a bit of pressure in terms of, hey, why can't we do this so easily? So yeah, it's super interesting. We got 10 use cases. Let me just rattle off a few. Access a website in a language, translate real-life text with vision-based tools, localize a live-streamed speech, dub a short-form video, transcribe a podcast, interview or vlog, turn written scripts into audio with voice AI, and a few more. So really, really interesting short pro guide on all of these different use cases that consumers are now using language AI. So, subscribers can get it. Otherwise, I think it's $250 or something. So go get it. On the agenda today, Esther, we have a gentleman called Andrew Ng, who published on LinkedIn of all places, on agentic machine translation as his little fun weekend project. And now you're like, hey man, you're geeking out. What is agentic machine translation? It's basically a virtual LSP. It's a really interesting concept that we're going to just try to unpack in a second. Then Apple, we'll talk a bit about Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference that happened a couple of days ago, but now they keep publishing new stuff. RWS had results out. There's some news around the CEO leaving. We have DeepL's mega round, and then you have your M&A corner. So what's going on? Who is Andrew Ng? Do we know Andrew Ng?
Not personally, but he is the Coursera co-founder and chairman, and also the founder of Deep Learning AI.
And on his LinkedIn, he has like 100,000 other roles and titles and founderships and CEOships, and he is an investor and a VC and all kinds of other things. But yeah, it's one of the godfathers of kind of modern deep learning / AI. And so he posted, I think it was yesterday, well, depending on when this podcast comes out, but like early in the week, that he'd been working on agentic machine translation as a quote unquote fun weekend project. I love how these guys are like, let me disrupt an entire industry as a fun weekend project, right?
Yeah, what happened to gardening?
Yeah, what happened to gardening? That's what these guys are doing. They're publishing open source AI stuff on the weekend. So I'm gonna have to read a little bit, but basically the gist of it is you have there's now the idea that you can build like almost a virtual LSP by having different LLMs take different tasks. So different LLMs or LLM agents taking different tasks, right? So let me read from Andrew Ng's LinkedIn post. So he says, I think AI agentic machine translation has a huge potential for improving over traditional neural machine translation, and I'm releasing as an open source demonstration. Again, I've been playing with as a fun weekend project. So he continues saying, using an agentic workflow, this demonstration prompts an LLM to translate from one language to another, reflects on the translation to come up with constructive suggestions, then uses the suggestions to refine the translation. And in our limited testing, he continues, this is sometimes competitive with and sometimes worse than leading commercial providers. Leading commercial providers, basically LSPs, right? Then he continues like, okay, with consistency, you add a glossary, it gets consistent. You tell it you want Spanish for Latin America, it does the regional variation. You tell it, be informal, it becomes informal. So all of the things that we know really well in the language industry, he says this is not mature software and that he hopes that the open source community can make agentic translation work much better. So that reminded me of another story we covered. That was a research paper by Chinese tech giant Tencent, Shenzhen-based, I think that they're the company that does WeChat and all of that. So they had the same thing. They had this kind of virtual LLM-based LSP where I think it wasn't just glossary and regional variation, all of these different agents. I think they literally had like project managers, like LLMs being a project manager.
Like 30 different roles or something, I think.
30 different roles. They had like a floor plan, like an actual floor plan. Like here is the LLM pretending to be like a project manager, etc. So yeah, it's a very interesting new direction. I think you looked at some of the comments, right, on the LinkedIn article. I mean, when this guy posts, it has like 5,000 likes and hundreds of comments. So what did you see there?
Well, I mean, lots of comments, some from people within the language industry, some more from, I suppose, enterprise side and AI, as you might expect from his profile. But yeah, I mean, kind of mixed comments. You've got some people saying, wow, this is the best thing ever. It's revolutionary. Thank you for spending your time on this. Other people and other companies saying, well, there's things that resemble this out there already. Other people saying, oh, it'll be really costly to run translation in this way. And other people, what was the other point? Sort of saying, why do you need this agentic approach? It's effectively sort of sequential. Why can't you just give all of the relevant info up front? So yeah, lots of discussion happening on that thread.
I mean, think about it. So we had Georg on the pod from Phrase, right? Phrase knows every little nook and cranny of every localization workflow problem there is, right? And now they're leveraging these powerful new models, plugging them in, and solving these problems. But they know all of the hard tasks in the localization translation workflow, and they're coming from that approach, right? Leveraging these new models. Now you have somebody like Andrew Ng, who's like coming from the more foundational side of things, like really the models, the deep learning, like I'm sure he's worked on machine translation in the past at some point, right? Coming from a more, I guess, industry nitty-gritty naive point of view, but very deeply knowledgeable about the actual underlying AI tech, right? And so it's interesting. Like you're sensing that obviously he understands the AI, but he probably doesn't appreciate all of the nuances of the localization workflows, and that you can probably not just prompt all these little LLMs to do all these nitty-gritty jobs, right? So it's an interesting concept. I think this agentic machine translation, it's probably been tried by many TMSs and maybe some, companies like DeepL, who knows, right? In the background, is it a revolution or is it the big new thing? I'm not sure. I think we should probably get somebody on the podcast who's a bit more knowledgeable. But it strikes me more as kind of a playful weekend project for the time being.
As he built it, yeah.
As he built it, yeah. Maybe that's why he puts that caveat there, kind of fun little weekend project, because he probably realizes there's probably a bit more depth to the problem.
Well, and it's open sourced as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's on GitHub. And then Adam Bittlingmeyer from ModelFront said, like, hey, he said, like, don't post this on LinkedIn, post it on the machine translation Reddit, because the hardcore MT people are not going to find it on LinkedIn. They're not hanging around here. All right, but we have to admit we're hanging out on LinkedIn, so that's where we saw it. So Apple had this worldwide developer conference earlier this week, and there was all this talk about OpenAI being integrated, and blah, blah, blah. We're not going to go into that. I think that's for the tech blogs to cover. So we were frantically trying to find some translation news piece from that conference. The only thing we found at the time was that translation widget on Apple Watch. I mean, and then you had the predictable headlines like, oh, Apple just killed all of the translation startups because they now have a translation widget on the watch. I mean,
again.
But then this morning, we saw that there was another announcement that they're going to come out on June 12th. So at the date we're recording this podcast, which they called Meet the Translation API. So that's kind of in a follow-up. That wasn't in a main conference, but like in a follow-up cycle. And now they're publishing the video. Probably by the time this podcast is out, the video will be online. And they're teasing it. They call it Meet the Translation API. And then they're saying, discover how you can translate text across different languages in your app using the new translation framework. We'll show you how to quickly display translations in the system UI and how to translate longer batches of text using your app's UI. So I'm not sure if I understand this correctly, that they actually want app developers to use a machine translation API to translate or localize the app UI, or if you can integrate the Apple Translation API into your app as like if you actually need batches of translation to be done. Probably the latter. I think the actual localization of the app might not be target number one for a translation API.
Yeah, it's not clear to me either. I think we can have a look once it's out properly.
Once it's live. Yeah, so, again, take this with a grain of salt. We don't have access yet to that actual video. So we just wanted to bring it up so people can maybe go when they listen to this and check it out, because by the time this is out, it's on Apple's website, I'm sure. All right. Let's talk about RWS. they published their half-year results today, again, 12th June, and let's see if the investors like it. The investors like it. Shares are up 10%. So just run us through the top line numbers here, revenue and profit.
Yeah, so on the top line revenue, there was a decrease of 4%, taking them to 350 million point three British pounds compared to the previous year. So that's 4% down versus the previous year. And adjusted profit before tax then also fell by 16% to 45.6 million pounds.
It's interesting that the stock's up, though. So let's unpack why the stock's up, right? Because you would think that, okay, I mean, high level, like company, you know, in this kind of AI craze, and it's kind of a, you know, company that's been around for a couple of decades. So revenue decreasing slightly, profit decreasing. Why would the stock be up 10%? Because I think they're actually getting a fair amount of traction with their new service offerings around AI. I think they're saying now like 1/3 or 25% or something of all of the service revenues are either from AI-enabled or AI-centric offerings like Train AI, their data for AI solution, right? Or from like post-editing, machine translation things, just, you know, offerings where AI is kind of at the core, machine translations at the core. They have these new products and offerings that they launched. One is called Evolve, which they call a linguistic AI solution. And one is called Hi.
Hi.
They call it a digital self-service platform for translation aimed at small and medium-sized businesses. So Evolve, I think, is more of the enterprise level. You know, you can kind of take different components of it and build your enterprise workflow. And HAL, again, is for kind of SMEs, self-service platform. So yeah, I mean, they seem to get traction. Also, what's really interesting is the Train AI. You know, this it's the data annotation, language data annotation, other data annotation arm of RWS, which seems to be doing quite well. So they're saying their major global technology clients are increasingly benefiting from their data services expertise. So maybe some of the volume that Apple is losing is now going to RWS. Who knows?
Yeah, Appen.
Appen,
Not
yeah.
Apple.
Maybe
Yeah.
Apple volume that went to Appen is now going to RWS. No, maybe more the Google account. So in terms of the divisions, I think language services, they said, return to growth. IP services also return to growth. Then language and content technology revenue contracted, but they're getting more SaaS license revenue. Remember, we spoke about this like a couple of years ago. They transitioned, you know, Trados and some of these other products from like you buy the thing and then you have it on a perpetual license to like a more software as a service. You pay a, you know, monthly or annual fee. So that seems to be going well. And then I think the real challenge right now is in regulated industry, in the life industries, in life sciences specifically, and some of the financial services companies. Yeah, I mean, with life sciences, we had Linguamatics at SlaterCon London. You know, the IQVIA language services arm, and they spoke about how they basically insourced all of the translation work, right? And they're now a super large life sciences focused language service provider. So that's a major competitor to companies like RWS. What about the outlook? Did they say anything about the outlook?
Yeah, on the outlook, I mean, seemingly reasonably positive. So anticipating a stronger second half of the year. So that would be to the end of September. They say that's going to be driven by new business wins and also recovery in some of the higher margin parts of the business. And then, of course, there are ongoing investments in AI and also the other strategic initiatives, which they're saying they expect then to deliver and support longer term growth. Obviously, despite the fact that there might be some uncertainties still on a macroeconomic level that might impact some of the market segments. So yeah, there's confidence, I think, overall at that level in what they're doing.
There is. I mean, I find it interesting. I mean, let's look at the challenges we know, right? Like the kind of was the nuts and bolts translation work that was just super profitable 5-10 years ago. Like in certain areas, it's really slowly fading. But if they seem to be managing the transition to this, again, data labeling, AI services, integrating, putting new offerings out, seem to be managing it quite well so far, because it's like AWS, it's kind of like a super tanker that you need to, shift, and it's probably it's a very challenging transition, but I think they seem to be doing quite a good job if I'm looking at these results, and also the investors like it. Again, now the stock's up like 10% since this morning, so stabilizing. They're at a valuation of like, what is it, roughly $800-900 million, which is less than half of what DeepL convinced investors DeepL is worth. Tell us more.
Yeah, well, this was a M&A, investment story that we covered a few weeks ago. I think actually the news came out more or less at the time that we were gearing up for SlateCon. But yeah, DeepL, as you said, raised $300 million in funding, and the valuation for them there was $2 billion. So yeah, huge, lofty benchmark there of $2 billion valuation. They had already gained the unicorn status when they had, I think, in early 2023, there was a funding round that they had there that took them over that $1 billion valuation mark. And I Googled, and apparently double unicorn is a term. So therefore, we can refer to them as a double unicorn.
Does it have two horns?
Two horns,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe two heads. I don't know.
Then it's not a double uni. Isn't that an oxymoron? Like if you're double.
Oh, double uni.
Double uni.
Then
a double corn.
Maybe they're not on either side. Maybe they're further back. Anyway, point being, yeah, this is obviously an achievement for DeepL. And then in terms of the investment, it was led by Index Ventures. There were also other investors, as you would expect, participating: Iconic Growth, Teachers Venture Growth, and some of the existing investors, VP, Atomico, and WIL. So yeah, fresh funds, obviously they are now well moneyed. They say that will be used in part to fuel the company's expansion into the US. And also, I think in that piece of news coverage said that it was already the company's third largest market. So US already a major market for DeepL, and they plan to grow further there. There was a quote from the DeepL CMO, Steve Rutter, who said, the funding shows how much interest there is in AI models like ours that focus on specific functions like translation. And then, I mean, obviously we don't have a lot of, let's say, underlying information in terms of revenue or profit, as would be expected in a case like this. But DeepL says they have more than 100,000 customers, many household names, and is operating in 32 languages. So that was big news when that emerged a few weeks ago.
And just the contrast, just stark, right? You have this huge company with 4,000 or 5,000 full-time employees, RWS, doing this transformation into AI, into fully technology enabled services, into subscription revenue, right? Worth, now what, $800 million. And on the other hand, again, a company like DeepL, it's kind of tech native, AI native, pure tech. Although I'm sure they're going to have to add some type of managed service on top at some point if they want to go enterprise. Is now, they convinced VCs to part with their money at a $2 billion valuation. So, probably they got the lead investor might have invested $200 million or something for 10% of the company. So yeah, I mean, obviously different ways of valuing a company. One is out there, day-to-day investor turnover in the public market, and the other one is one transaction. So you can't really compare the two, but still interesting contrast there. So we'll see in the next 5 years which one, whose valuation was justified. Now, speaking of AI-enabled translation or machine translation, I think shots fired from Unbobble. They launched something called Tower LLM, and they say it's offering best-in-market machine translation with Gen AI. They say it was designed, trained, and optimized on high-quality multilingual data, and that Tower LLM provides best-in-class performance translation on a wide variety of translation tasks. And I'm saying shots fired because they specifically say in their press release that the Tower LLM provides superior translation quality to leading LLMs like GPT-4o, GPT 3.5, while consistently outperforming Google and, drumroll, DeepL. That's an interesting press release. So you're going out and saying that you're consistently outperforming Google Translate and DeepL in a press release. So yeah, again, shots fired by Unbubble there. I'm sure that DeepL is gonna, maybe fire back at some point.
Also a great name. I like the name Tower LLM, personally.
I was processing Unbubble Tower. Okay, it took me a second. Oh my God. Yeah, my LLM is a little slow today.
Your LLM, okay.
Maybe it's a small language model in my head.
Very small, yeah. Well, we were talking about big sums when it came to DeepL valuation, and there's more potential big sums being floated around at Keywords Studios at the moment. So this was a few weeks ago also. The game localization and game services provider Keywords Studios confirmed that it was in advanced discussions with a Swedish private equity firm regarding the potential sale of the company. And the offer on the table, or the bid, I should say, was £2.2 billion, or around $2.8 billion US dollars. The private equity firm EQT is the one that put in the bids for the Irish headquartered Keywords.
Wasn't it like they bid, they sent a few bids and then they always got rejected, and at some point the board said, well, now that you're valuing us at like more than 2x our current market value, maybe we're going to accept?
This is, sort of potentially best and final. I don't know, but I mean, this is a large amount, like you've said, on the basis of how Keywords shares were doing at the time. And then on that news of the potential deal, Keywords shares soared by more than 60%. So they also went up on that news.
Yeah, for those on YouTube, let me just try to share the screen here.
It's a good time. Good time if you invested in Keywords.
So look at this. So basically it just went from, if anybody's watching this on YouTube, it went from like 1,100 to 2,100. And that's obviously sticking there until the bid either clears or, maybe the board rejects it or something. It's probably going to happen.
Yeah, they've got a microsite dedicated to the potential offer.
Oh, they do? Okay.
It's at least under serious consideration in these advanced discussions, I would imagine.
Hey, we're glad that one other LSP or LSP-related company is going into the hands of private equity because, it's not like there's almost every other company in the space is private equity owned.
Okay, you're being sarcastic. I was going to say, well, I quite appreciate having some listed companies where we actually get some regular information and disclosures from them.
Yeah, 100%.
Keywords obviously not pure localization, pure translation. They do a lot of other game-related services, but they do generate about a third of their revenues from localization. So let's see how that all pans out there. And then we also covered news of a couple of smaller acquisitions recently. So over in Australia, you had Melbourne-based language service provider Ethnolink, which acquired a Sydney-based competitor called Language Professionals. And then over in the media localization space, Zoo Digital acquired, I think this news came out this week, acquired one of its Italian dubbing partners called Logo Sound. And in Milano, and thereby launched Zoo Italia.
Zoo Italia in Milano. Maybe I can pay them a visit when the tunnel opens again. I think tunnel's gonna, well, it's open now, but not at full capacity. That's a bit of an inside remark. Anyway, let's move on. We spoke about the pleasures of having listed companies in the language industry, so we can go and dig into their financials, which is very much unlike all of these private equity companies that tend to be a closed box, black box. So we have a bit of news from AMN, so that's Healthcare Interpreting, Straker, and it's Zoo actually.
yeah, perhaps we can stick with Zoo, since you just mentioned them. I mean, obviously, there was some turbulent times in media localization in 2023 off the back of the strikes in Hollywood. So many of the media localizers had a bit of a tough time. But Zoo's latest financial results, or specifically, I think the March 2024 revenue that they revealed, is sort of indicating that demand is back for media localization. They had a sharp uptick in March 2024. Accelerating in the pipeline, and they said that was the highest monthly revenue since April 2023, so in nearly a year. And consequently, they're expecting the revenue uptick to then also positively impact the full year results to the end of March 2024. So that was good news from Zoo, and a good outlook from them.
And US healthcare interpreting is doing really well. It's kind of saving the day for AMN.
It does seem so, yeah. I mean, so AMN Healthcare is the parent company. Within that, AMN Language Services is, as you said, the language services specifically interpreting provider. That grew 16%. So language services business grew 16% year on year. This is in Q1, I should say, so for a quarter. So it grew 16% on the year and 4% from the previous quarter, so from Q4 2023, growing to $71 million just for the quarter. Albeit the sort of other areas of the business were flat or struggling. So the company had, I think, flat revenues overall. But yeah, I mean, like you say, the language services element there doing incredibly well. And I think, going to be receiving additional investment from the business as so they've implemented some austerity measures, sort of redirecting some funds as a result of that towards key areas of growth, which would include language services.
And Straker, our friends in New Zealand / Australia, they don't want to be translations anymore. They're rebranded. But that's actually older news. That's older news. I think they announced this some time ago. I think they just put it in their annual report. So they dropped translations from the name, and they rebranded Language Cloud to AI Cloud. Revenues, we have dropped a bit, 15% to like $30 million as of March 31st. And language services was impacted even more, right?
Yeah, language services down by almost a quarter, 24%. In the revenues for the full year. But they say they saw growth in managed services, which is a newly created segment for the business. They say managed services is designed to manage their clients' internal translation processes. And they said this is an industry trend because more companies are looking to remove hard costs for translation management. So that one, I think, had an impact, I believe, on the EBITDA level. So they actually saw, despite the decline in revenues, it had strong growth in adjusted EBITDA. So that then tripled up to about $2.75 million.
All right. Well, that's it for today. Hey, RWS still going strong, up 12% now. So looks like there's a solid bid over there in London for that particular stock. All right, we'll check back. Hopefully it's not going to be another 4 weeks until we have another news podcast.
Otherwise we'll have another mega long session to catch up on.
We are kind of glossing over a few other stories. Of course, go to the website. It's all there, right? But there's a lot happening. I mean, the Andrew Ng thing, we picked up literally a couple of minutes before we started recording. So, forgive us if it's not the most elaborate take, but there's just a lot of things happening out there still. And we try to keep you up to date. So for now, go register for SlaterCon Remote, happening in a couple of weeks, and SlaterCon Silicon Valley on September 5th in the beautiful little town of Menlo Park, where our friends at Meta are also based. Cool. All right. Speak soon.